Because my brother-in-law has a role in the renovation of Strauss Park on 6th Street, I've been hearing for the last several days about planning, budgeting, strategizing, and scheduling all that goes into ensuring the success of that project. It's just like the example Jesus gives us in the gospel today about the work of building a tower and the basic wisdom you need to complete that task successfully, ending up with a sturdy tower built on a firm foundation. I wonder if you might not agree with me that just this kind of wisdom is often sadly lacking in our world today. How many construction projects, how many government programs, how many new and improved big ideas fail precisely on account of poor planning or some personal or political agenda, which proved to be no substitute for the simple wisdom of doing things thoughtfully, carefully, selflessly, conscientiously, even prayerfully, seeking God's counsel in all things. Wisdom. If you knew me, you'd be saying, "You're preaching about wisdom?" I'm much better at being foolish than I am at being wise, but I'm going to forge ahead anyway. Wisdom is the key to these scriptures, and the key was given to us in the first reading from the book of wisdom. Makes sense that it should be there. Here's a snippet of what we heard. Our deliberations are timid and our plans unsure. Our minds are weighed down with too many worries. How can we get by without the wisdom God offers us? Of course, the scriptures aren't primarily intended as advice for construction projects. The work at stake here is our relationship with God and how we're doing in building that relationship. What keeps us from being wise, or at least what often keeps me from being wise, is that wisdom is often counterintuitive. It often goes against the grain, takes us by surprise. It scuttles our self-interest in favor of the needs of others. Following the path of wisdom takes more time, more effort, more sacrifice. Following the path of wisdom means you don't take the easy way out. Doing what's wise is always more demanding than doing what's foolish, even though what's foolish looks at the beginning to be easy. I discern wisely, I plan wisely, when I prefer God's way to my way. When I prefer the truth to a lie. When I prefer giving to getting. When I prefer God's word to my word. When I prefer the high road to the shortcut. When I prefer right to wrong. When I prefer faithfulness to betrayal. When I prefer God to everything and everyone else. This business of preference is very much at work in the curious words Jesus spoke today about hating. When he said we can't become his disciples without hating father, mother, wife, husband, siblings, children, without even hating myself. Suppose we were to take the same words that Jesus spoke and transcribe them in terms of what we just learned about wisdom. Then it would come out like this. If you want to follow me, you'll need to prefer me to your parents. You'll need to prefer me to your spouse and your children. You'll need to prefer me to your brothers and sisters. You'll need to prefer me to your very self. That's a tall order, isn't it? How do we get there? How do we get to do what Jesus is asking of us here? Too often, I think, we approach our Christian faith as though it's a rule book upon which we'll be judged in terms of how well or how poorly we've kept the rules. Friends, if it were only that simple, but it's not. Jesus asks for more than obeying the law, more than just following the rules. Jesus asks for our hearts. Jesus asks us to prefer him to everyone and everything else in our lives. The question then becomes not how well did I keep the rules, as important as that is. Rather, the question is, in my heart of hearts, when push comes to shove, when the rubber hits the road, when it's time for me to walk the talk, whom and what do I prefer? Whom and what do I prefer above all else? Teachings of Jesus in the gospel give us rules to live by, absolutely. But is that enough for Jesus? If only it were. Jesus asks for it all. These scriptures today may be among the most difficult for us to take in, to understand, and to follow and to live. And that's especially true when you consider all the things in our lives that call us to prefer them rather than the Lord and his word and his way. For example, the entire advertising industry in the world has one goal: to change our preferences. And Madison Avenue isn't trying to get us to prefer God above all things. No way. Social media, something I use every day in my ministry. Social media is built not on making us one big happy family, but rather it's built on revenue and profit generated by advertising, seeking to change our preferences. The social culture you and I live and breathe every day is rooted in a philosophy that denies the existence of objective truth, encouraging us, each of us, to determine our own truth based on what each individual prefers the truth to be for her or for him. We're up against some very strong and well-funded opposition. Wisdom invites us to prefer God first and foremost, above anything or anyone else. As soon as we begin to do that, as soon as we begin to try to do that, in fact, as soon as we desire to do that, we want to do that, it's then that we begin to follow Jesus, right then. And in the beginning of following Jesus, we begin to share in carrying the cross, without which, he told us in the gospel today, we cannot be his disciples. To carry the cross. Jesus, in his suffering on the cross, preferred us. Jesus, in his suffering on the cross, preferred you and me and our salvation to his own life. He gave away his life in preference of us. St. Paul reminds us that for some, the message of the cross is foolishness, but that for those who follow Jesus, Paul says, the message of the cross is wisdom, the wisdom of the cross. In a few moments, we'll go to the Lord's table to receive the Eucharist, Jesus' life given for us on the cross. In his heart of hearts, when push came to shove, when the rubber hit the road, when it was time for him to walk the talk, Jesus picked up his cross and preferred no one, preferred nothing, not even his own life, to his love for you and me.